Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hello, listeners. My guest today knows what it takes to lean into large-scale leadership challenges. She was in charge of leadership development at software giant SAP, and most recently as interim CEO at Science World in Vancouver, BC. I first met Janet Wood through my work with the SupportingLines Institute, and I'm really honored to explore more of what we've explored in recent conversations today. And Janet, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Thanks, Nate. It's great to be here.
Right on. I think I'd like to jump right into the scale at which things needed to happen in this leadership world that you are in with SAP. I work with a lot of small business owners and new leaders, and this is a unique opportunity for me to also learn about, the scale at which things needed to happen and kind of what was at stake. What could you share with us about the role you were in there?
Well, just a little bit of background. My entire career had been in sales, and then at SAP, I'd also run what was called the Maintenance Go-to-Market Organization, the Global Systems Integration Organization, partner side for SAP. But SAP had, for the first time ever, gone to an American CEO and a single CEO, and he wanted to really kind of accelerate the leadership culture at SAP. Previously, the feeling was when you came to SAP, whatever company you came from, whatever culture you kind of had in your mind, that was fine. And so Bill McDermott really wanted to be seen as a world-class leadership culture. And he felt that someone from the business might have a bigger impact coming from that world than someone in HR. And so that was when I moved into HR, had a chance to move to Germany and headquarters and lead it globally. So it was my first HR role for me, and it was fantastic. So the feeling at SAP was that we were a little bit out of balance. When I reached out to leaders, like the top 40 leaders, and asked them kind of what their thoughts were, we were a bit out of balance in terms of more emphasis on business success and not enough on people, the advancement and development in people. And with the way, the world was going from a talent perspective and the war for talent, we knew that if we didn't get that balance right, we were going to lose some really good people. And so that was really the urgency. And plus, we were really changing from an on-premise software organization to cloud. And it's much harder to make that transformation than it is to jump in and start a cloud company. So for all those reasons, Bill really wanted to focus on the leadership culture. And that was just a huge opportunity for me, and one of the best career moves I ever made in my life, to go into HR.
Yeah, I can kind of feel that in your energy, just that opportunity to be a part of something new and great, and something that the organization felt needed to happen. What are you most proud of?
Well, there's two things I think about, and both are at SAP, interestingly enough. The first was I was asked to create, about a year after joining, a little less than a year after SAP acquired Business Objects, which is where I had worked. I was asked to create a new organization, a new global organization where one had never existed. And it was because it was a particular area of the business that SAP was struggling with at that point in time, getting some kind of not great press about it. And so it required going out to all the different organizations around the world who had budgets and who had people, but scattered. So there was no global strategy, no global execution, and convince them to give me the resources and give me their budget, and I would lead this new team. So it was a combination of convincing leaders around the world to trust me, that I would create an environment which would be more successful for SAP and make their lives better. The employees to trust that they were going to leave their region. There was a strong sense of belonging to a region in SAP, like Europe or North America or APJ, and come to me. And it took time. And there was never SAP is a very consensus-driven organization. So the CEO wasn't going to go and say, give Janet these resources and this budget. I had to go and make my case for why this was a good decision for them and how they'd benefit from it. So it did require building trust. And it took time, longer than if it had just been mandated, but it was very successful. It was one of the best times of my career. Really enjoyed. We had a terrifically positive outcome. The organization was very successful. And it also reinforced to me how important trust is. And that's my second thing I'm most proud of, was we drove this leadership trust culture when I was then leading leadership development at SAP. We put a trust question in our employee survey. It was a net promoter score, so minus 100 to plus 100. We held leaders accountable. If a leader was below a certain click level, like plus 20, we engaged to really help them understand what it meant to be a trustworthy leader. And that just, I'm so proud of that, because it really very quickly permeated throughout SAP how important trust was. And you know, Nate, how critical it is to be able to move fast. It means you retain employees. Employees are engaged. There's more innovation. There's happier customers. Trust just touches everything. And so those are the two things that I'm most proud of.
When you think about those initiatives and the importance of trust and how proud you were about what was accomplished, and the environment that we're in right now, as people are coming back to work or just competition, we're going to get into that a little bit. Yeah, just how do you feel that's so relevant a topic right now today with the state of the world?
In many ways, it's even more critical than it was then. All the studies and data is showing that up to 50% of employees are considering changing jobs over the next 12 months. And so the trust that a leader has with their team is even more critical. All the statistics show that over 80% of employees, when they leave, say they're leaving because of their direct manager, because they didn't enjoy working for them. And of course, trust is both character and competence. People often think about trust as just integrity and honor, and it's also competence. It's also employees believing that their leader really knows what they're doing, that they are leading the company or the team to a successful outcome. And so with all the competition these days, and it accelerating because of the pandemic, trust is even more important. And I've got an example of a board that I sit on that is based here in BC. They're starting to lose employees to an Ontario-based company who doesn't care that they live in Vancouver. Whereas the company they work for here is looking for them to come into the office even 2 to 3 days a week. And they're saying, no, I choose to work for a company that's letting me stay at home 100% of the time. So there's many factors that are going to go into whether an employee stays or goes. And it's also how they've been managed through the pandemic. Has their manager been empathetic? Are there tools regarding, helping them adjust to this new world we're all living in? But it's also, do they trust their manager? Do they believe that their manager has their back? And so to me, it's even more critical now than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. The tagline to this podcast, Leading with Curiosity, is that command and control leadership is dead. And I'm hearing this sense of leaders needing to meet their people where they're at, even more than this is how we're doing it, you're in or you're out. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I found, because I often had a global role and my team was not sitting outside my door, I had to make more of an effort to connect with the team. I had weekly team calls. I had weekly or bi-weekly one-on-ones. Whereas sometimes when the team's right outside your door, you have this feeling like, oh, I see the team. I talk to the team all the time. But it may be just kind of passing in the hallway, and it's not necessarily giving the employee really what they're looking for. And yet, so I think this is going to be a big adjustment for leaders. Leaders who are used to having a team sit around them are going to really have to adjust to feeling, that things are still going ahead, measuring the team on outcomes, not time in the office, because they're not going to see them as much. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's really important for anybody who's mentoring people managers or coaching them to really help them adjust to this new world. And again, trust comes into it, right? You need to believe that your team members are working, even though you can't see them. And you've got to be outcome focused and not thinking, I haven't talked to them today, so what are they doing today? It really changes your interaction with your employees when you don't see them on a regular basis.
Gosh, and you just said it. You've been doing this for a large part of your career, leading a team in multiple time zones in multiple countries. For so many people, this idea of being remote is new. Yeah, that's it's always been that way for you for a long, long time. One-on-ones. Jeff, at Supporting Lines, we talk a lot about effective one-on-ones. And of course, in the world of coaching, that's, you're taking time and space and being there for somebody. Tell me about what's an effective one-on-one for you.
Well, one of the things that I've tried to do, not always is, it's kind of up and down a little bit, but is have a set, how we want to run and manage our time together. So it could be, especially when you're remote, it could be, let's talk about the last 30 days and the next 30 days, and then what are the issues you're dealing with. So giving the employee kind of the guardrails of how the conversation is going to go. It doesn't mean it's rigid, but it helps them prepare. Okay, I know what Janet or Nate are going to want to talk about in this meeting, so I can prepare for it effectively. So it's doing a lot of listening, of course. We've talked before about the unintentional diminishing behaviors, and how sometimes as a leader, you think that you're helping, but in fact, you're unintentionally diminishing the employee's capabilities. And one can be being overly optimistic. So I'm fortunate that I have a natural ability when a challenge comes at me to kind of, maybe be concerned about it for a little while, and then very quickly, okay, and how am I going to get through this? But people digest and manage those things at different rates. And so if an employee is telling you about a problem they're dealing with, and you're instantly on the solution, you need to let them talk, let them vent a little bit, maybe work through the problem themselves, not jump to you've got the solution, this is no problem, let's go. So it's also about really listening. Of course, you can't let anybody really wallow in a problem. At some point, you've got to get through it. But it is not too quickly trying to dismiss it and move on. Whether it's a personal issue they're dealing with or a business issue they're dealing with, it's the listening and helping them come to a conclusion that's going to work for them in the business.
You've just described a coaching conversation, and in our training, letting them set the expectations and outcomes that they're looking to get from the conversation, listening, not trying to solve their problem necessarily for them. And you have mentioned unintentional diminishing behaviors in our conversations previous. And as you just said it, I'm thinking there's a listener out there that just hit rewind on their podcast player. What was that again? Tell us again about that. I think it's worth diving into further.
It's from a book called The Multiplier Effect. And that's, of course, about how do you take a team and really they operate at a level that's even greater than they believe they were capable of. And so the other side of that is this diminishing behaviors. And they're on their website, which I'm sure you can share with your listeners in the link. You can do this really quick little test as a leader, and it just gives you an idea of what are those things that you think are helping but aren't helping. And I'll share, so I'm overly optimistic, and so I have to really think about that, be aware of that. I'm also what's called a rapid responder. So especially because I did have team members on different time zones, sometimes being in Vancouver on the West Coast, I'd see an email and think, okay, well, someone on my team who's responsible for this area and lives in Philadelphia, it's already 8 o'clock their time. It's not fair to think that they'll respond. Or maybe they're in Germany, so it's the middle of the night already their time. And so I would want to respond. One, I want to be helpful and I want to be responsive, but really, unless it's urgent, you're not helping by doing that. I've basically disempowered the employee who's responsible for that area. So it's twofold. One, it tells the person who sent the email, well, I'll just go to Janet next time. I don't need to worry about this other person because Janet will respond. And two, the employee, my team member, who's very, very capable, is like, okay, well, what am I here for? Janet's just going to respond if it happens. So instead of feeling like, oh, thank goodness Janet responded, it was 8 o'clock my time, they're feeling like, Janet's not letting me do my job. And taken to the extreme, the employee can eventually be really disengaged. Like, I'm really not going to bother because Janet's just doing everything for me anyway. So it's really understanding what are those things that we have blind spots and we think we're helping and we're not. And again, if it's urgent, that's one thing. If it's not urgent and it can wait, you let the person who's responsible respond.
That one of my favorite things about having great guests on this podcast is hearing themes about leadership said in different ways, and they're so tied together. And when you describe unintentional diminishing behaviors, it makes me think of the leadership circles work where our strengths pushed too far start to work against us. So mine being a need for courageous authenticity. So I like when people get along. I really like when teams get along. Hey, this feels really good. At the expense of letting certain behaviors in the team go, like, is that worth dealing with, or should I just let that one go? In the case of hockey camps that I've run for years, it's a 5-day camp and it's Wednesday and there's something happening that that isn't right. And I think, well, we only have a couple more days and that coach will be gone and we'll just deal with it. And meanwhile, everyone else is seeing that behavior happen, thinking, when is Nate going to do something about this? Right. So it's that desire to just have that good culture and not rock the boat and have everyone get along unintentionally is actually creating little wedges and little cracks in the culture because I'm sort of tolerating it too much. So just kind of drew a connection there.
It's a great example because the only person that's happy is the person you're not confronting.
Wow.
The rest usually see what's going on, and to your point, they want you to do something about it. So you're kind of keeping one person in the dark and happy, and the others are not happy. And as a leader, it's hard to have those conversations, but you really have to look at that bigger picture and don't tell yourself that no one else notices. They always notice.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The only person that's happy is the one that you're not talking to, and they always notice. We've been talking about it here this week, just the importance of leaning in right away. It's a little bit like you're going cliff jumping and you're on the edge, you're ready to go, and then you second guess yourself, and then it takes you another 10 minutes. Those hard conversations are almost always worth it and feel good when done, and yet we procrastinate. We do whatever we can, some of us anyways, to avoid them. Yeah.
One of the things that I learned early on in my career is to have especially when I would take on a new team or someone new would join the team, is to have the conversation to say, this is my leadership style. And one of the things I'm going to do is give you feedback. I'm going to give you feedback about things you're doing well, but I want to confirm that you're open to me giving you feedback when I think there's things you could do better. Every single time the person says yes. Yeah. And so to have that conversation before there's an issue makes it much easier if there is a challenge to then say, hey, okay, I'm going to give you some feedback. I hope you're open to it. But if you wait until there's an issue, it's a lot harder to say, by the way, I'm going to give you feedback along the way, and I have some right now for you, and it's not positive. Mm-hmm. So if you can have that conversation early, it kind of opens the doors, it paves the way, and it makes it much easier than if there are tough conversations that need to happen.
I just wrote down the word permission in my book here, that permission that I'm going to communicate directly with you. And then it also creates some accountability. Now they're actually expecting it. They're actually expecting to be supported and developed and be helped through their strengths and their areas of development. Ryan Walter played 1,000 games in the NHL and is in the leadership development space. And when he was coaching the Vancouver Canucks, asked a player who was underperforming, I need your permission to help you in this area, this bad habit that you have that's probably going to result in you no longer playing in the National Hockey League. I want to be in your corner on it. And I want you to expect that I'm going to remind you every time that, you're living these bad habits. And how the story goes, of course, the person said that would be absolutely great, and they did it, and all he needed was a little kind of head nod. He didn't even have to say anything anymore, and the player went on to score 20 goals that season and had a long career. So it's that permission to create that culture that we're going to talk about things that need to be talked about in advance just can do so much to make those even more meaningful.
Well, I've always assumed that employees want to be the best they can be at their job. They want to excel. They want to be promoted. That's how I felt. So I would hate to find out that there's something I was doing, X months or years later that's held me back and nobody told me. So I've always gone in with the assumption of people want feedback that's going to help them perform better. And then it's really about how you give the feedback. And you've got to give the positive feedback too, not just the development feedback.
Yeah. In some work I do with the Roy Group in out of Victoria, we teach a feedback model where we encourage leaders to give the person they're giving feedback to the opportunity to speak first. What's going well? What's been challenging? What do you think? What do you need to think about moving forward? Let them kind of empty their bucket and then invite, would you like some feedback from me? And every time I've used it, 100% of the time, by the time you say the words, would you like some feedback from me? Oh, yes, please. I can't wait. Whereas normally there's that thought that there might be some defensiveness, but anyways, yeah, just giving people space to be there for them and let them be a part of that process. Jeff Smith loves to talk about the annual performance review versus the bi-weekly or monthly one-on-ones. What do you mean 11 months ago I was doing something that you didn't want me to do, and now it's coming up in my performance review? I think he likes to say that performance reviews are great for, confirming holidays and pay increases and et cetera, things that are needed in the organization. But it's the development conversations that need to happen throughout the year that we're talking about here that can make all the difference. And it sounds, as I say it out loud, so logical, yet people get busy doing the work, don't they? And head down in the computer and let the human side slide.
This is why at SAP we went to what we called continuous feedback. So we went away from everything kind of pivots around one conversation. It's your performance rating, it's your bonus for the year, it's your raise for the next year, into this continuous feedback culture. And SAP at that time had 8,000 employees, or 8,000 managers, sorry. So about 80,000 employees. They're much larger now. So we started with 1,000 managers and did all the training and then piloted it and got feedback from the managers and from the employees, and set expectations that it doesn't mean you're going to have an hour-long conversation every 2 weeks. It just means you're going to check in and tell the employee how they're doing, because that's going to maximize their impact on the success of the business and their career and your success as a leader. And so it went really well, but we totally disconnected that conversation from, you're exceptional and therefore your raise is X and your bonus is Y. We really separated them. And a lot of organizations did that at that time, Adobe, EY. So it was kind of a trend about 5 years ago, but it really is effective if the leader will do it. There can be some leaders who feel like, okay, I'm off the hook. I don't even have to have the year-end conversation now. Woo! But you've got to kind of find those ones out and make sure they understand that that's not the intention. The intention is to really help the employees be as effective and as happy and as satisfied as possible, so that it has the biggest impact on your business and your customers.
Yeah. At SupportingLines, when we use the high performance index, which is the system that Jeff has created and to gather data on high performance culture, the data, as the numbers of people surveyed go up, the data starts to tell a story, and it's all correlated. So one impacts the other, and the evidence keeps coming back to two things: a leader living the values of the organization and have bloody one-on-ones. Those two things impact, so they're correlated academically and statistically speaking to so many other areas of high performance culture. Two very doable things, two behaviors and decisions that are very tangible. And I think that so many young leaders think that leadership is something that, oh, Janet's got it. I don't know what it is, but she's got it. But there's so many tangible things that we can do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis with the teams we lead that translate into a high-performing culture. What comes up for you when I describe that?
Well, the first thing I think about is that it's really about caring about your team and caring about their success and understanding that their success therefore equals your success. You can't be successful if your team's not successful. And you won't have a high performing team if they don't really feel like you're there for them, that you have the character, that you have the competence, that you're coaching them, that you're giving them realistic goals, you're taking obstacles out of their way, all those kinds of things. So yeah, for me, it really starts with genuine, authentic caring about your team. And we used to say, or I used to say at SAP, because some leaders had very negative net promoter scores. And when we would tell them the score, the email would come from me. I would get sometimes emails back going, well, this can't be possible. I can't be minus 50 or minus 100 or whatever it was. And it just made me realize that no one comes into the office and says, today, I think I'll lack character and competence. They somehow lack the tools to understand how they're coming across, or, there are, of course, there's some percentage that don't care or they're not capable for some reason, but the vast majority want to be good leaders. They want their team to be successful and they want to be successful. So that's why, supporting lines and the coaching is so critical, because we all have blind spots. We're all doing things we don't understand the impact. And it's really important to have someone totally objective, not necessarily your manager, tell you, here's what I see, and here's the tools to help you kind of be stronger, be better, be there for your team.
Mm-hmm. Back to when you say like 8,000 managers, the stakes are so high in leadership effectiveness. Could you just share with us just the impact that those programs that you implemented have on such a large scale across the globe? It's sort of far beyond arm's reach that, most of us that are in smaller organizations live on a day-to-day basis.
Definitely. And there's so many different cultures as well to deal with. In Germany, there's works councils, which are kind of like a union, but aren't really a union. In Japan, it's super hierarchical. And no matter how hard you might try in Japan, it can get very hard to get people to really look beyond that hierarchy, not just the managers, but the employees as well. I remember being in Japan one time and meeting with employees and saying, I'm a very open person. You can ask me anything. I'll never get offended. And dead silence until a manager asked a question. Like they just couldn't break past that. I can't ask a question until the manager, my manager asked the question. So it's very tricky in a large global organization to have a consistent objective and yet deal with some very different cultures. But we piloted it. We brought in experts to help us, ensure that we were setting it up and kind of using world-class lessons learned from other companies who'd started to do things maybe before us. I did a lot of engagement with leaders beforehand, so they were supportive when it came out. It's like you need that air cover. So you want to start, of course, with employees understanding, but you need to make sure you've got that air cover, that when an employee says, hey, I'm really looking forward to the continuous feedback you're going to give me, we're going to meet every 2 to 3 weeks, that the manager says, what? I'm not doing that. So it's really thinking about managing it as a big project, thinking about all the stakeholders, and really, having the right messaging and, the communication, like many, many, many times. There's a great book called Make Change Work by Randy Pennington. That was a bit of my Bible during this, because it was really about how to manage change management. When you're making any kind of significant change like that, you really need to manage it like a project and have strong change management in place. And a lot of that is like communicate. Just when you feel like everyone's sick of hearing about it, you're almost just getting started on the communication.
Okay.
Especially these days, right? So many emails, so many Zoom calls, so many everything. It's hard to break through the noise.
Yeah. Back to the unintentional diminishing behaviors, just my own personality, I would be excited to roll something out and with good intention. And to your point, someone that's going to be responsible for it didn't know enough and feels probably circumvented. And suddenly this great idea is experienced by that person in a completely different way, because you called it air cover. They weren't in on it ahead of time before it got rolled out to their team. So important to thoughtfully think through who needs to know what and when. And that might sound bureaucratic to certain people, but there's there's human feeling at stake, and there's that sense of feeling included in the process.
And one of the most important things is understanding what it means to them. What's in it for them? Everyone wants to understand, okay, well, what do I have to do, and why is this helpful for me? So you can't just say, this is what we're going to do now. And it's obviously it's the different message in terms of what it means to the employee versus what it means to the manager. Hopefully the manager is getting that continuous feedback from their manager as well. But it also means, you're going to have a team that's more engaged. You're going to have less attrition. And here's all the things, the benefits of that. So for each of the stakeholders, you really need to explain what's in it for them. What's the strategy and why are you doing it?
And then layer in across cultures. That's my master's in education. I remember my favorite course was intercultural communication, and just where even personal space, right? A handshake in Texas is perceived differently in Japan. Perfect example, right? I have friends who have played pro hockey in Japan, and you had to pass to the older players on the team. Fascinating,
professional
right?
Hockey. Yeah. And you had to pass the older player.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Just think if you could break that paradigm, how successful that team would be.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so much we can learn about respect and trust from other cultures too. Jenna, it's been such a pleasure. I knew it would be. I've learned a lot. There's going to be some links to some books and the self-assessment that people talked about that we talked about in the show notes. And I knew I'd learn a lot, and you've given me some great things to take with me here. And I hope the listeners feel the same way.
Thank you, Nate. It was really a pleasure. It's such an important topic, even more so now than ever. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.